today in Psalm 73, this is what we're gonna see. Psalm 73 is gonna help us with when we see something in our lives, or you experience something, or you go through a season in your life, and you look at the circumstances with your eyes and you're like, I don't like that. That's messed up. I don't appreciate that. That is unfair. It is not fair that this would be happening. And so, for instance, it might be a situation in your life where you are at work and you're working hard and you're being really diligent with your work, but you keep getting passed up for a promotion. Some other joker gets it every single time, right? Or you compare yourself to your fellow workers and you're like, I work harder than them, I work better than them, but I feel like I'm being cut out of the leadership pipeline, or I feel like I'm being cut out of the company, or my contributions aren't appreciated. And that's really unfair that it would be like that. Maybe for some of you, it's a situation where you want to be married, you want to have a spouse, or you want to have a family, or you want to have children, and that's not happening, and other people have that, and you're just like, this is unfair that it would be like this. Or maybe you get some bad health news in your life, or you get a series of bad health things that happen to you, and they just keep compiling upon one another, and you're like, other people are happy and healthy, and they seem like they're doing pretty good. Why do I have to deal with these kinds of things? That is unfair. Or maybe you feel like you're following God, and you're doing things the right way, the best you can, but you just never get the breaks. And other people do get the breaks in life, but you don't get those. And maybe you begin to see that, hey, maybe honesty and integrity is not the best policy. At least it's not really the way to get ahead. So I'm gonna have to compromise. And it would be best if I live this way, but everybody else lives this way, and things seem to go better for them. So maybe I should just do what they're doing. It's unfair, and maybe that's just the way the game has to be played. Or maybe you're a kid that's here today, or you're a teenager, and you look at your family situation, maybe you got some siblings, and you're like, I know I'm not the favorite. I know that my parents like this sibling a little bit better. They favor this sibling. They cater more to this sibling. They make me do things I don't want to do. And other siblings have it better than I do. And so that's unfair the way that I'm treated in my family. Maybe you don't make a team. Maybe you don't take a top position. Maybe you don't get varsity. And you're like, that's unfair. Or maybe sometimes it just seems like people who don't give a lick about God and don't care to follow him at all actually are doing great in life. They're doing better than you. And so you begin to say, as you look at that situation, I don't know if it's worth it to follow God. I don't know if I should even be doing this because I don't seem to be getting ahead like others are. Have you ever dealt with this in your life? Circumstances or situations that you look at and you just have a sense that it is unfair, and maybe even sometimes teetering on this, like, is God even worth it? In these times, I think what we begin to feel often as we look out upon the world and we feel that things are unfair, we maybe see that things are unfair, is it can start on a continuum where maybe at first we're just unsettled by it. We're kind of unsettled by what we see. But if we begin to think about that and process the circumstances, we can begin to move into a place of frustration with it. We're really like ruminating on it. You're thinking about it a little bit more. And what in a low grade way is unsettledness starts moving to a sense of frustration about the circumstances and the situations of unfairness. And then if we stay in that place and continue to think about them and build a narrative, you can actually move into a place of anger where you lash out, where you're upset at people, at God, at others, at your environment that you're in. Or on the other hand, where you might end up is despair, where you're just sort of like, I give up. I don't care, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm going a different direction in life. I'm going to make other decisions. So from unsettledness to frustration, and eventually maybe into anger or even into despair. All because of what you see and what you feel seems to be unfair. So what do you do about this? Because I know that some of you are in this place right now. Like today, this message is written for you, and maybe afterwards you're gonna be like, Jeremy, did you know my circumstances? And I probably don't. I might know some of them actually, but I know that some of you're in this place right now, and the way that you're looking at life is, this is unfair, and I don't like how this is turning out, and I don't want it to be that way. And if you're not there, I have some really good news for you. You will be there at some point. It's gonna happen, right? It's gonna hit you at some point where you're gonna feel like this just is not fair. So what do we do about that? And that's what Psalm 73 helps us with today. So grab your Bible there in Psalm 73. We've got a guy writing this. This begins the third book of the book of Psalms. Remember we said before, Psalms is made up of 5 books. This begins book 3, and it's written by a guy by the name of Asaph. In Israelite worship, when they worship God, we've said before, their worship was centered around a temple. So the people would come to a temple where God's presence dwelt. And at the temple, one of the things that you would find when you would go there would be temple choirs. Choirs that would sing these psalms and other songs to God. Asaph was one of the choir directors. He founded one of the temple choirs and wrote this song for us. And what he writes in this psalm, Psalm 73, he's writing out of his own personal experience of unfairness. What he saw, what he felt when he looked out in the world was a sense of unfairness with what was taking place. And it was a sense of unfairness that unsettled him. And then it led him to frustration, and it led him to the brink of despair. So check out his struggle here, starting in verse 1. He begins his song this way. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. You're like, well, that sounds pretty good. Sounds like Asaph is in a pretty good position, right? But here's what he's actually doing. He knows that he's about to take you on a roller coaster ride, and you might fall off if you're not buckled in. So he's like, to start off, I gotta buckle you in here a little bit because it's gonna be a really bumpy ride. I'm gonna tell you, this is where we're gonna end up. In the end, this is what we're gonna get to, that God is good, and if you walk with him and you seek him, it's gonna be okay. But let's go on the roller coaster ride, verse 2. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold. From the very beginning, you can see Asaph's despair that he is feeling in his heart. And then he tells us why. Verse 3, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. And from the beginning, you get the sense of what he's gonna be seeing and feeling is that the wicked are prospering. Why do the wicked prosper? Why do people that don't follow God, that don't walk with God, why do they get to go there? Why do they get to have that? Why do they get those experiences? Why does it seem like they're blessed and that their life is really good when they're not following God? They're prospering. God, I follow you, and I don't know if it's worth it. When I compare myself to them, they seem to have a better life than I do. These are the kinds of things that Asaph is thinking. And he begins a spiral, and he shows us the spiral in verse 4. Here's how I view them, he says. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They're not plagued by human ills. Everything is good for them. Therefore, since things are really good for them and they're blessed and they're entitled, pride is their necklace and they clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff. They speak with malice, with arrogance. They threaten oppression. In other words, because things have been so good for them in their lives, they're proud, they're arrogant, and they oppress others. They mock other people. They're sarcastic. They're mean. They're oppressive because of how wonderful their life is. And God, they're wicked. It's not fair that it would be that way. Verse 9, their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of earth. In other words, to me, Asaph says, they appear to be completely in control of all their surroundings and circumstances. They take control of heaven and earth by what they do and what they say. Verse 10, therefore people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. This is probably a way of saying that they have great influence over others. They have great power over others, and other people come to them and fawn over them and follow them on social media and mimic what they do and want and desire their lifestyle. This is the media. This is movie stars. This is sports stars. So much influence. In verse number 11, they end up saying, how would God know all of this? Does the Most High know anything? So in other words, at the end of their lives, they live all this way. They're completely blessed. Everything is absolutely wonderful for them. And in their hearts, they say, I don't even know if God exists. And if God does exist, forget him. We don't have to follow him. We don't have to do what he wants. Why would you even believe in that? Because look at how great our lives are. And so Asaph summarizes in verse 12, this is what the wicked are like, always free of care. They go on amassing wealth. Do you see Asaph's spiral here? I envy the wicked because their lives are perfect. They're amazing. They have so much power. They have so much influence. They're prospering. They have so much wealth. What I see and what I feel seems very, very unfair. Don't you feel like this sometimes? Be honest. Don't you feel like this sometimes? Why am I following God? Other people don't follow God. They do what they want to do, and their lives seem to be so much better than my life is. Why do I have to deal with all of this? It's not fair. Or why don't I get to do that, have that experience get to go through these things. Because in our society, people are really good at projecting that everything is good, that life is perfect, that happiness is all that they experience and they're prosperous all of the time. So what it often can look to us like is that everybody else's life is better. Their life is easier. They are happier. Now, every once in a while, we get a little glimpse that maybe that isn't actually the case. Because every once in a while, we hear about a tragic suicide. You hear about a really messy, ugly public divorce. Or someone checks themselves into an addiction center, right? But it's easy to quickly ignore those things, to move on, and those things fade from our memory. And our distinct impression is actually that people are far happier and better off than we are. That's what we see when we ponder and just look with our eyes. And then as we think about those things and begin to build this narrative in our minds, that begins to be what our hearts feel as well, deep within us. So that it is really easy for us in the world we live in today to get to the place that Asaph gets to where he's envious. He's jealous. We're jealous of other people. I'm jealous of what they have or what they have to deal with or what they don't have to deal with. And it could even lead to despair, to where we say, well, the way that I'm living, what I've decided to do, it just isn't worth it. I've got to go a different way. This for sure is what Asaph feels. Look at verse 13. He comes to this conclusion. Surely in vain I've kept my heart pure. I've washed my hands in innocence because all day long I've been afflicted and every morning brings new punishments. Right? Now, Asaph does feel a little bit like Eeyore, right? Here, like just moving around, every day terrible, it's horrible, right? And you know some people that are like that. But it's easy for any of us to get to this place, looking out by just what we see and what we feel, to be like, I don't know if it's worth it for me to follow God, because it just seems like I get one hard thing, one difficult thing after another. And that's what he's feeling. In your heart, it could look a little bit like this. God, as I look out at my life, I look at others, I don't have a spouse. Or I don't have the spouse that I want. I would like an exchange. Could I get an uneven exchange? I'll exchange this one for a different one, right? I want this to be different. Or I don't have the family that I want. I don't have the amount of children I want. Or I don't get to live where I want to live. Or I don't have the income that I think I should deserve by this point. Or I don't have relief from physical pain. Why do I have to have this chronic thing to deal with? Or why don't other people have the mental illness that I have to deal with all the time? It's really difficult, right? Why do I have this? Why do I not have this? Why aren't the place that I'm at in life, the schedule that I have, why is it like this? Other people seem to have it so much better, and God, it is not fair. Now again, like I said, I think this kind of thing happens in us in a low grade way all of the time. I think that in the society that we live in, we all are constantly dealing with what I would call a low-grade unsettledness with the unfairness of life, right? From the kid that complains about not getting what her siblings get, right? Why did she get more ice cream than me? Why does she get to stay up later than me? Why is her curfew later? Why can't I do this, right? Kids sort of tend to have this, especially if you have sibling groups in your family. You compare it to your siblings and you feel like you often are the one that gets shortchanged. And so you get unsettled by that. It could be to that, or it could be to our constant comparison of our fellow employees, right? I know you do it. You all do it. Everybody does it, right? Man, I contribute more. I think my contributions are more valuable. I should be able to lead that. I should be able to do that. Why wasn't I asked to do that? That person's a loser. I'm going to nice them to their face, but I actually know what's really going on. They're not doing their work. That's unfair. To comparison with our neighbors, whom we love our neighbors, and we smile at our neighbors, and we talk to our neighbors, and we care about them, but we really think that we're the ones that deserve the hot tub or the swimming pool in the backyard, right? Because if I had that, I'd invite the rest of the neighborhood over. I would care for this well. I would steward this covered gazebo or whatever, covered porch really well, God. If I had one of those, why don't I have that? To the much bigger things in our lives, like our family situations, our health and our wealth. Again, I think we all are living with a low-grade unsettledness as we compare to others and deal with what seems to be unfair. But if we stay in that place of unsettledness and we begin again to ruminate on it and to think about it and to build out a narrative, eventually we'll move from unsettledness into frustration. And if we stay in that place of frustration where you're really thinking about it and really building yourself up, you eventually will move into the place of anger or despair, so that what you see and what you feel completely shapes who you are. We listen to ourselves, right? And we become convinced that we got shortchanged, that others have it so much better, and this really is unfair, which I think we all can agree is a terrible place to live, right? I mean, I think some of you are living there. You probably are living there. But if you step back from it for just a minute, doesn't that feel terrible? Isn't it terrible to live into a place where you feel like life is unfair and you always got shortchanged and everything's terrible and everybody has it so much better? I don't think anybody really does want to stay in that place. So what do? Look at what Asaph does, verse 15. He says, if I had spoken out like that, all of this that I'm seeing and feeling, if I would have talked openly about that, I would have betrayed your children, God. When I tried to understand all of this, it troubled me deeply. Now, there's a couple of things that are going on here that are important for us to see. One is that Asaph is being honest about what he sees and what he feels, and this is absolutely vital. I tried to understand this. I tried to process this and see what was going on, and that's vital for you to do, to realize there are bad things in this world. There is unfairness. It's not like there is no unfairness in this world. You're gonna face it, you're gonna feel it, you're gonna see it, living in this world from other people, and so it's important that you do process it, because there's a number of things in life that are unfair. So we can't just suppress our feeling and our emotions. That's not the answers. I mean, in large part, that's what the Psalms are. They are the processing of emotions and feelings that we hold deeply inside of us. At the same time, Asaph realizes that as a leader, he needs to be very careful with what he says and how he says it and how he processes. If he just vomits out all of his frustrations in front of whomever he is around, if his bitterness is just unleashed, it could cause harm to others. And he recognizes that. Maybe think about this in your own life. Have you ever gotten in your mind that a person is a certain way or they did a certain thing, and then you ruminate on that, you're upset and frustrated with it, and so then you begin talking about it to other people. And you haven't talked to the person, but you've observed or seen something, and you sort of label a person, and then you talk to somebody else about it, only to find out later on you only knew half of the story, and you were kind of caught. Maybe somebody either calls you out or you begin to just see in your own mind as you put the pieces together, I didn't know what I was talking about. I probably shouldn't have said that because I didn't know the full story. And you realized if you would have just sort of backed off a little bit, right, that you wouldn't have said something that caused harm to another person that was actually unfair, that you did that. Now think about this. Have you ever changed your mind about anything? Like from 10 or 15 or 20 years ago that you thought something was this way and then later on you end up changing your mind? Have you ever cheered for the Minnesota Vikings only to realize how wrong you were later on? No, I'm kidding. Kidding about the Vikings. My point is this, as humans, we don't see it all. We have a limited perspective, and sometimes we do change our minds, and sometimes new information comes into play. So what Asaph is saying here is when I just unleash everything that I'm thinking and that I'm feeling on others, we could do a lot of harm. We need to process it, but we have to do it in the right way, and Asaph shows us what that right way is. You get a little glimpse from him here, however small it is, that he realizes that all of his frustration and despair was coming only out of what he saw and what he felt as a human being with a limited perspective. It's like he begins to realize that maybe his perspective is limited and that he doesn't actually see everything. And so he goes to God for perspective. Look at verse 16 again. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply until I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destination. Asaph has one of these, oh, that's what's going on moment. He gets some new information. He gets a different perspective that comes from God. And the perspective God gives to him is this, oh my goodness, light bulb goes on kind of a moment. These people are not nearly as well off as I think they are from my own limited human perspective, right? Have you ever had one of those moments you can think about, like reading a novel or watching a movie where you think things are going along these lines, and then as you get to the end, you're like, there's a big twist, and you're like, oh, that person's the villain? That person did it? I didn't see it coming. I didn't know that was gonna happen. One of the best movies ever to do this was The Sixth Sense, right? M. Night Shyamalan's first movie that came out. I know since then some of you are like, I have no idea what he's doing now, but like for a while there, that Sixth Sense, and you're like, oh, I'm not gonna give away the movie. You can watch it, but it's one of those, oh my goodness moments. And for Asaph, he has that kind of enlightening moment here. He realizes that he has been looking at the whole thing only through his human eyes, his human perspective, one limited human perspective. Now hear me carefully on this. As humans, our perspective, it is needed. It can be helpful, but your perspective is also insufficient. Just think about this in a very physical way. God created our human bodies with two eyes, and the eyes are in the front of our head, so that what we see is here, what's right in front of us, and somewhat on the peripherals. And some of your peripherals are even a little sketchy, right? Like you're like, it's kind of a little bit more like this, especially as you get older. I see right here. Now, if I want to see something that's going on over here on the side of the stage, I have to turn my head, and now I don't see anything that's going on here behind me. I only see what is directly in front of me. I remember when I was in third grade, and I had this teacher in third grade, Miss Chester, that did not like me very much at all. And that was the story of my schooling years, is my teachers either loved me or they hated me. There was no in between with Jake Hart. Like, you hated me or you loved me. I was kind of sarcastic and sharp tongue, and some teachers thought that was funny, and other teachers were like, you're an idiot. So that was my upbringing. And so Miss Chester was in the category of, you're a little turd, is what the category I think she was in. And so what I'm gonna tell you is I do not recommend for any children to do, but Miss Chester was up at the chalkboard one day writing, and we did have chalkboards when I was in school, and she's writing on the chalkboard, and she says something like, I don't want any students to be raising their hands right now. She's right on the board. So here's little third grade Jeremy. And I just put my hand up like this because I know she's looking at the chalkboard. I just got my hand waving in the air. And little Susie over here yells out, Miss Chester, Jeremy's raising his hand. And so Miss Chester whips around from the chalkboard. She looks at me and she goes, I know he was. I have eyes in the back of my head. Now, I should have repented and been humbled at that moment from what Miss Chester was saying, but in my little heart, I was like, Miss Chester, you're a liar. You do not have eyes in the back of your head. How could a liar be a teacher in a Christian school of all places? So this is seriously what I'm thinking to her, because I knew even as a third grader, you can't see behind you. That's why I had my hand raised, being the little jerk that I was at that time, right? Because we know we only see what is directly in front of us. The vehicles that you drive have blind spot detectors that beep at you when a car is in your spot you can't see. Some of you have vehicles that have 360-degree cameras. They're like around your entire vehicle now so that you can see all around you because they're places that you can't see. And for every single one of us as human beings, you sleep for 6 to maybe if you're a teenager, 12 hours a night, right? Where your eyes are completely closed and you actually see nothing. And if that's true of us just in a very physical sense as human beings, recognizing how much we don't see, that alone tells us we need another perspective. Perhaps we need the one who sees and knows everything, who is awake when you are asleep, who sits above the earth and sees everything that is going on. We need God's perspective. And this is what Asaph begins to do here. He comes to God for perspective, and the perspective that God gives him is this: Asaph, not everything is the way that it seems, and it's not gonna turn out well for the wicked. It will not turn out well in the end for those who don't follow me. When Asaph turns to God, see further what he begins to see. Verse 18, he begins to see, God, surely you place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. They're like a dream when one awakes. When you arise, Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. In other words, God begins to give Asaph a time perspective that people are temporary. Not everything is as it seems, and all of their wealth, their prosperity, all this goodness can be swept away just like that. God removes the curtain a little bit and tries to show Asaph behind the scenes about what is really going on. Things on the surface may not even actually be as good as they seem, but for sure, these individuals have no relationship with me, God says. They have no eternal relationship with me. They are on shaky ground. Compare that with what Asaph recognizes in verse 23. Yet I, Asaph, I'm always with you, God. You hold me by your right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. In other words, he says, these individuals who actually have no relationship with you, and they're on slippery ground, I'm on solid ground because you see me and you're always with me. And in fact, he would say this, you have held me by your right hand, that's the past. You guide me right now with your counsel and your wisdom, that's in the present, and in the future, you're gonna take me to glory. So my past, present, and future is taken care of because I am with you, God. And so he goes on to say, who do I have in heaven but you? In the place of power and ultimate perspective, who do I have but you, God? And down here on earth, it has nothing that I need, that I desire beside you. Help give me your heavenly perspective down here on earth. I need you more than anything else. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God, you're the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it's good to be near to God. I've made the sovereign Lord my refuge, and I will tell of all of your deeds. Perspective. Asaph needed a different perspective. He needed more than what he saw and what he felt. He needed more than what was just in the moment right in front of him. Because what was right in front of him, it was messed up. It was unfair. It wasn't all the way that it should be. But his view of it was also incomplete until he got God's perspective. Until he got, hey, I'm actually much better off than what I felt in that moment and what I saw with my eyes. And in the midst of all of this unfairness that I am experiencing, God is with me. He has held me. He will counsel me forever, and he will take me to heaven with him someday. You know, I need this. I don't know about you, but I need this in my life. In the little and the big unfairnesses of life, I need more than what I can see and feel with my own eyes and with my own heart. Let me share with you first, just in our own lives, what I would call low-grade unfairness and unsettledness that we experienced a couple of weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, my wife Michelle took all of our girls, except for our oldest, up to a family camp at Clear Lake. While she was up there, our oldest daughter, Lexus, was on the Mexico missions trip with our church. They were in Tijuana and in San Diego. And while they did that, I was here at home with the dog, the wonderful Labradoodle MJ, and we were chilling at home. I was planning and praying and getting ready for the fall and studying and doing all of these kinds of things at our home. Well, partway through the week, all of these health things started happening at one time. So Michelle is up at the camp and like COVID's breaking out, and she's like, I think we might have COVID again, like for the second time. This isn't looking so good. Some of the girls aren't feeling well. I'm not feeling well. What should we do? We got to figure that out. So she's up there doing that. Then we get a call from Alexis, our daughter, who at this point was about a day out of coming back home. They were back in San Diego, and she's like, I'm not doing well. I'm not feeling well. She has to go to the urgent care, and we end up finding out she probably has kidney stones and isn't doing so well. And is she going to be able to fly home and work it out and be okay and all that kind of stuff? And then, not nearly as significant as that, but I smashed my toe, something awful. Pretty sure I broke my toe, limping around and dripping blood all over. Blood is just coming out all over the floor. I'm trying to get into the house, you know, doing one of these numbers, hopping around, can't put weight on it. Okay, so again, not as significant as the other things. Now, I put all of that again in the unsettledness category, maybe slight frustration with what is going on. But it would have been really easy for me to build out a narrative of this is completely unfair. You know how? Because it would have been easy in my mind to say, God, I have a daughter that is serving you on the mission field, that is following you, going to Mexico with the church. My wife is investing spiritually in our family and in our children and in their relationships. And I'm a pastor, for goodness sakes, trying to study and pray and plan and prepare to lead our people into the fall and to be on mission with you. And you're gonna let all of these things happen to me right now? I mean, I know people right now that are in Cancun sipping pina coladas. We're serving you and you're letting all this stuff happen, right? You could see how you can get there. You could see how you could begin to think those kinds of things. And then sometimes it's really hard not to begin thinking like that and feeling those things. I've told you before, we love Iowa. My wife Michelle's from Iowa. We've lived here when we were really young and in college. And then we've been back in Iowa for 7 years. And we love you. We love this community. We love this place. It's awesome. But in the 7 years that we have lived here, if we like list out for you all of the stuff, all of the health things, all of the health struggle, or the family, we've had multiple family members that have died. Within our family, we've had cancer diagnosed, we've had Parkinson's, we've had heart disease, we've had diabetes, we've had genetic issues that have gone on. And many of you know, if you've been around for a while, that Michelle went through a period of time where she had 3 surgeries in 1 year. She lost her colon. There was a small period of time where a couple weeks where I was like, I don't know if she's gonna survive this. I don't know if she's gonna make it or not. Thinking about raising 5 daughters and going through that whole process, all of those things you're feeling. It's easy in those moments to build out a narrative of unfairness. And there are times, I'll be honest with you, where we've been unsettled. There's times where we have been frustrated. And there is times when we have felt great despair over these things. And I know that many of you get this. You felt this. And some of you are actually in that place right now where you feel that way. This is not right. This isn't the way it should be. This is unfair. And what am I supposed to do about it? In the midst of all of those things, you know what brings us back every single time? What lifts us up and sustains us? It's verse 25 here. God, who do I have in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My heart and my flesh is failing, but you're the strength of my heart and my portion forever. And verse 23, I'm always with you. You're always with me. It is God's perspective and his presence. And sometimes when my mind begins to go down that route of this isn't right, this is unfair, why do I have to deal with this? You know what I have to do? I have to take a step back from that and I have to come before God and maybe open up a psalm. Some of my favorites are Psalm 25, Psalm 103, this Psalm, Psalm 73, Psalm 86. You can find your favorites as well and you just open this up before God and you say, God, this really stinks and I hate it and I'm struggling and I'm wrestling and I need your presence, I need your help. I have to just breathe. I have to step back from what I'm seeing with my eyes and say, God, will you illuminate my perspective? Will you give me a sense of your presence and your peace? And in those moments, it doesn't resolve it like that. I've told you before, it's not like you're taking a pill and all of a sudden you feel better. It doesn't necessarily happen that way. Maybe sometimes it does, but most of the time I don't think it happens like this. But in those moments, there's a calm assurance from God that he is with me, that he is present in what is going on, and that he wants to be my strength, guiding me now, as he always has, and taking me with him to glory someday. How do we put all this together from Psalm 73? What I want to do is I just want to give you 3 truths to summarize what we've seen here from Psalm 73 today, to just build out 3 solid truths I think that we can hold on to, that Asaph leads us in. And the first truth is this: how do we deal with the unfairness that we face, that we see, that we feel in life? The first truth is this: guided only by what we see and feel, we have a tremendous capacity to be selective and only dwell on what fits our narrative. Let me say that again because there's a lot there. Guided only by what we see and feel, we have a tremendous capacity to be selective and only dwell on what fits our narrative. If you make the choice to continually dwell on what seems to be unfair, you'll begin to ignore anything that is good in your life and only receive and accept what is bad. Popularly, we call this confirmation bias, and it's a real thing, and it's innate to most of us. Confirmation bias is when we have a value, we have a belief, and we only accept what fits that already decided belief. Right? So what we observe, what we see, what we receive, and we filter out anything that might be contrary to what we already believe, and we only accept what we have fixed our hearts and our minds on. That's confirmation bias. And man, we have an incredible capacity to be able to do that. It's pretty innate inside of us. Maybe in a simple way, this isn't quite the same thing, but it's similar. It might be like how when you buy a new vehicle that you've never had before, and then you see that vehicle everywhere on the road, you're like, wow, everybody bought this vehicle at the same time. I can't believe it. I've never seen it before. It must be a brand new model because nobody's ever had this, but now I see gray Honda Odysseys everywhere. They're all over the place. Now, if it is the gray Honda Odyssey, I might remind you that you're in Johnston, okay? And so, gray Honda Odysseys, yoga pants, and protein shakes are gonna be in abundance, right, all over the place. But it's that thing that you begin to see it everywhere. Or maybe you learn a new word. Have you ever learned a new word before? And you're like, I've never heard this word before. I can't believe I heard this word. Here's the definition. And I heard it 4 times this week. 4 different people in 4 different contexts use that word. Now, I'm pretty sure you heard that word before, but it just never locked into your brain. Once it locked into your brain, then you begin to see it everywhere because you're looking for it. You recognize it. And the same thing can happen with the unfairness of life. When you rely on only what you see and feel with your eyes, you're gonna be selective, and you can build out a very compelling narrative for how your life is unfair, right? Where you begin to say, everybody is like that. It always happens this way. It's all bad. It never goes my way. It is unfair. Everything is unfair. I had a pastor that used to say this, to the jaundiced eye, everything is yellow. And when you make a decision and you're in that place and your heart is sick in that way and that's all you dwell on, that's the only thing that you're going to see. The second thing we have to realize is this: as we do this, we dwell on this narrative, we only see what is negative, our hearts get more engaged and settled on a limited reality. So it begins in our mind with what we observe and see, but that can pretty quickly move into our hearts and completely change how we feel and our emotions. And we get locked into this settled reality that is very emotional. We start moving from maybe being unsettled by unfairness to being frustrated to being in despair. We spiral, and now our hearts are getting cold and bitter. Did you notice how Asaph does this here in verse 4? Look at it again. He says, these wicked people that I'm comparing myself to, they have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They're free from common human burdens. They are not plagued by human ills. Now, you know that's not true. We all know it's not true, but when you build the narrative and your confirmation bias kicks in, that's all you see, and that's all Asaph sees for a period of time. Verse 13, surely in vain I've kept my heart pure. I've washed my hands in innocence. I'm in despair now. My feet are almost slipping. Why should I even care about this? Because everything is terrible. But did you notice that there's something more that's actually going on here? Did you see from the very beginning something else that Asaph admits? Look at verse 3 with me. He says this at the beginning, for I envied the arrogant. So yes, there is some level of unfairness that is going on, but a big part of the problem, Asaph says, was my limited perspective that led me to envy. I chose to spiral and let my heart get to a place of jealousy. I wasn't thinking about God and his truth. I wasn't looking to him, and my heart got messed up. He actually shows us how bad it is in verse 21. Look at verse 21. He says, when my heart was grieved. Now stop for a second. Some level of that is okay, right? Because there's bad things in life and we have to grieve losses. We have to grieve bad things. We have to grieve unfairness. You should lament over those. You should be able to process those. Some level of that is okay, but then it moves, my spirit was embittered. Now I'm a bitter person. I was senseless and ignorant, he says. I lacked perspective. I'm limited in what I see. I was a brute beast before you, he says to God. Now, in our culture today, we use beast as like a positive thing, like she's a beast, he's a beast, like it's a good thing. That's not what Asaph is talking about here. He's talking about I was like an animal operating on what I saw, and by instincts alone, I had a limited perspective. He's confessing before God that he actually sinned in his heart with some of his thinking here. Now, look, this line between the wrongness of others, the wrongness of the world, the unfairness of life, and bitterness in your heart and anger and frustration towards God, it's a difficult line to figure out exactly where that is, right? Being sad and upset about unfairness versus going into anger and bitterness, that's not always clear where that line falls. But what we do know is that when we only operate based on what we see with our eyes and feel with our own hearts, we will get envious and embittered. And we need to repent of that. We need to admit that we crossed the line, that we spiraled, that we built out a narrative that was so negative and that led us to bitterness and to envy. So, are you in that place? Are some of you here today, or some of you that are watching, are you in that place where your heart has really moved into a settled sense of I'm angry at God, I'm mad at God, you screwed me over, it shouldn't be like this? Where bad things have happened to you, hard things have come into your life, but maybe you've settled in the place you've landed is being angry at God and envious of others. Or maybe for some of you, you've actually fallen into despair. Let me encourage you today, don't stay there. You don't want to live there. And God doesn't want you to stay in that place either. So instead of spiraling and staying there, lastly, embrace the grace of God's perspective and presence. Embrace the grace of God's perspective and presence. We need another perspective. You need oh, that's what's going on kind of I didn't see that before. I didn't think about that. I mean, the big perspective that Asaph gets here is this: not everything is as it seems, and God's got you. He is with you. And the amazing news is God wants to do this for us, right? Like look at this real quick. Compare verse 21 and 22. Asaph says, my heart was grieved, my spirit embittered, I'm senseless and ignorant. I'm a beast before you, God. Again, not in a good way. He's really, really messed up. And the very next verse says what? Verse 22, yet I am always with you. You're still, when I'm ignorant, when I'm a beast, when I'm not following you, when I'm angry at you, when I'm really messed up in my mind and in my heart, God, you're still with me. You're still guiding me. You're still counseling me. You're still gonna take me to glory with you even when I am completely messed up. You've gotta love this, right? That God is still with us in the midst of our darkest days, our deepest struggles. We just need to see it. And when you see it and you begin to sit in that, you will begin to feel it. Our perspective will be changed as we embrace his presence. You come before God like Asaph is coming before God here with all of your stuff, confessing before him, and God will begin to change your perspective and show you his presence. Now we should say this, sometimes the perspective that God is going to show us will be God shaking us up a little bit and saying, things are not nearly as bad in your life as you think they are. And sometimes that is the perspective that we need. This is part of the reason that our teenagers and all of our adults, you should go on a mission trip at some point in your life. You need this perspective. You need to see how other people live, what other people are going through. Get a heart of God for others as well. We need this at some point in our lives. Our unfairness, sometimes this is what God's gonna do. He's gonna show us that our unfairness is rather small compared to genocide, racial injustice, and living in poverty. Right? And sometimes as Americans, like we've got to have that kind of a perspective to step back and say, this is fairly relative. I don't live in Afghanistan right now where the Taliban has taken over the entire country. And if I'm a woman, I would be in deep fear there in that place, right? And so some of it is that kind of a perspective. Sometimes we need that reminder, but hear me carefully. This does not mean that whatever unfairness you see and feel here is invalid. It just means it needs to be placed in context. And God, if that's what you need, God will do that for you as you come to him. There's a really important truth here that I don't want us to miss, and it's absolutely vital. It's this word embrace. Embrace the grace of God's perspective and presence. Embrace is a choice, and we all have that choice. We have to decide whether or not we're gonna make the choice to dwell on unfairness, to build the narrative, to let our emotions get flared, to turn our hearts bitter. You can make that choice. But you can also make the choice to embrace the perspective and the presence of God. Again, hear me carefully on this. It is not a choice for you to ignore the unfairness that you see and feel. It's not a choice to deny unfairness or evil in this world. In fact, we have to lament, we have to sorrow over, we have to express it, we have to process it. That's what the Psalms are. It is one man's processing of the unfairness that he sees. So we don't just slap a Bible verse on it and say, hey, if you're a really spiritual person and you're really in with God, you're just gonna get over it, right? Stop worrying about that. That's dumb. We don't do that. But what it is it is a choice to bring all of this to God and seek his perspective and rest in his presence. One more time, verse 16. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply until I came to God. And let him give me his perspective on this. Throughout this series in the book of Psalms, we've quoted from Tish Harrison Warren, and she says this so well. Listen to what she says. She says, it is better to come to God with sharp words than to remain distant from him, never voicing our doubts and disappointments. It is better to rage at the Creator than to smolder in polite devotion. When the psalmist did these things, God did not smite the psalmist. Through the Psalms, God dares us to speak to him bluntly. She says, you gotta bring it to him. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking. In particular there, she was talking about Psalm 42, when the psalmist in Psalm 42 says, God, wake up. Why are you sleeping? Why are you letting this happen? Are you gonna let us be killed all day long? Is this what you're gonna do, God? That's what the psalmist says. That's in the Bible. That's in Holy Scripture that we have, right? This is what she's talking about. God doesn't smite the psalmist when he speaks this way. And yet she also goes on to say this. Yet we also live in a culture where it's easy to assume that we know better than God, that we have him pegged, that we have it all figured out. See, we must bring it all to him while we also acknowledge that our perspective is limited and we need him to enlighten us. That's what's going on in Psalm 73. And it's what you need when life seems to be unfair. We embrace God's perspective and we come to see what's really going on. And even better, we come to know this, verse 23. I'm always with you. So who do I have in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My heart and my flesh may fail, but God, you're the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Come into the sanctuary of God. Come into his presence. And you realize a God that takes your burdens, that takes your worries, that takes your fears, your struggles, your angst, your anxiety. He'll even take your envy and your bitterness and he'll forgive you for it. And he'll begin to change your heart and assure you that he is with you, always guiding you, always counseling you. And he will take you to glory someday. He wants to give you that perspective. You might say, okay, Jeremy, like how do we, like you said, come to God. Like how? Well, what does that look like? What do I do? Well, I would just tell you this, Psalm 73 is a really good place to start. To maybe open your Bible to Psalm 73. And if you're feeling this sense of unfairness, open that up and read it and think about it. And maybe pray those very words to God. The Psalms give you words to come to God with. They show you how to pray and how to approach him. Tell God your story. Cry out to him. Confess any anger, envy, or bitterness you have in your heart, and let him change you with his grace, and he will, because he is with you. He came down for you. He gave his life for you so that you would know he's always with you. Would you pray with me?